late in the last few months, where we have seen a lot of distress and tension in the Naqab and in the entire country. Rafat will share a bit about the current climate, young Palestinian Bedouin activism, and a bit about the local and larger political climate and how that affects the Palestinian Bedouin community today. So thank you so much for joining. And Huda, please. At الميوت هدى.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Huda Abu Abaid. As Odelia said, I live in Lakia and I work in the ICF and CF, Naqab Coexistence Forum with Odelia. You can say I'm an activist in the struggle of the unrecognized villages. This is enough, I think, to introduce myself. I'm gonna talk about a little bit about the history of, to give a little bit overview about the history of the Bedouin in the Naqab. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about how was the life before the establishment of the State of Israel and before the Nakba of the Palestinian people, and then to mention what happened after the establishment of Israel and the war of 48. So we're talking about a community that was around 100,000 people, that most of them were living in the west north of the Naqab, very close to the Gaza Strip. And the Bedouin community was not Bedouins that move from place to place every 2 weeks, but they were people that called kind of semi-nomadic, which means that they are moving twice a year in the summer and in the winter. They knew where they move, where they supposed to move, and most of the places they moved to were in the Naqab, and they were known for all the community, which tribe is moving to which place or which village. This was in 2 sentences the life before the war, before 48 and before the Nakba. After the war until the year of 1952, we're talking about that people left and moved to the, expelled, I can say, to the Gaza Strip and to Jordan. And from the number of 100,000 people, the people who stayed here were around 18,000 people. So we're talking about a very small amount of people that stayed here. The state of Israel decided that the Bedouin community, they will not leave the people live where they were living. they were bring them all to area called the Siyaj area, which the area between the city of Beersheba, Dimona, and Arad. And put the people under military area and military rule until the year of 1966. It was almost 18 years. In the late 60s, the State of Israel decided to establish first village or how I can say, yeah, kind of village, Tel al-Sabi', and bring the state of mind of the Israeli state was to bring all the Bedouin community to the village of Tel al-Sabi'. I should say that in the area of the Siyaj area, which is the area between Beersheba, Dimona, and Arad, were two groups of people who came from outside this area and the people who were originally living in this area, who was having kind of ownership of the land in this area. So we talk about two groups of people. So when the state decided to build a new village, which is Tel al-Sabi', the idea was to collect and bring all the Bedouin to live in this village, but the Bedouin people didn't agree to move because of two main reasons. The first one is that they don't have ownership about the land in this village. And the second reason was the state built houses or buildings that don't really good for Bedouin family, which was a small house with two rooms, one bathroom and one kitchen, and the state accepts that the people will really live in this homes, but they were very small and very close to each other. Bedouin people don't really feel free to or feel comfortable to live very close to each other. They were like living in their lands before the Naqab, and it was like they had a very big space to live in. So when the state decided to bring them to one small village and neighborhoods and 3 streets and buildings, it was very hard traditionally to live in. So most of the people didn't agree to move to Tel al-Sabi', but some did. Then in the late 70s, the state decided also to build or recognize other villages. The second one was Rahat. And the difference was that in Rahat, the state said that, okay, everyone will build his home alone. And this was like the success of the idea to establish Rahat, which means that people felt more comfortable to build their homes with the number of rooms that they need. And we're talking about big families with sometimes it's more than 10 members in the same village, in the same family. So people felt like more comfortable to move and to build their own homes. So this was the kind of success of building Rahat as a village and then as a city. After Rahat, the state decided to establish or to build or to recognize another five villages, which is Lakia, where I live, Hura, Kseife, Arara, and Shgib al-Salam, Sagif Shalom. So this is the 7 towns that we're talking about in our community. That I live in one of them. Rafat also live in Lakia, and now we're talking. What?
Also lives in the same one of them.
Yeah. And now we're talking about more than 120,000 people who are living in this villages or towns. In 2003, the state decided to recognize another 10 villages that until now, actually from 2003 until now, we're talking about 18 years. The state decided to recognize these villages. Until now, people there don't really have a good services. They don't have electricity, no streets. Some of them have some schools. Some of them have some community centers, clinics, but not all of them. So this is another 10 villages. We still have about 35 villages that the state don't recognize. Now we're talking about, the government is talking about recognition of 3 villages. And recognition, I mean that people stayed in their place and don't move from their lands, but the state do plan the village, do give services, which was now 35 villages don't have this services. So people are currently living in kind of illegal houses and illegal buildings, and the state said that the solution for the Bedouin problem is or to bring all the people to the towns and the villages that they already recognized or planned, and they will not never recognize all of the villages. We're talking about, I said 35. But I do believe when we look historically to the Bedouin problem or to the Bedouin struggle, that year after year we have some success to make the state recognize these villages. So now we're talking about 3 villages that hopefully the state will recognize in the next few weeks. In general, this is a very big like overview about the history of the Bedouin people in the Naqab. I think Amir and Rafat maybe will talk about the big struggle in 2013, about the power plan. So, and if you have any questions, so I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda. Thank you very much. I would like to contribute a few numbers to the discussion, and then Amir will take it away. The recognized townships Huda was speaking of as the solution in 1969 to concentrate the Palestinian Bedouin community in one area. There are 7 of these townships altogether. And the recognized villages that Huda was speaking of, most of which do not have basic infrastructure to this day. There are 11 of these recognized villages. In the Naqab, there are around a million citizens, a third of which are Palestinian Bedouin. So around 280,000 are Arabs, but of this third of the population, they have 18 recognized forms of settlement. The Jewish population has 144, whether it be cities like Beersheba, where I live, whether it be kibbutzim, agricultural moshavim and yeshuvim, and something called solitary farms, where one single family can share hundreds of dunam of land. So that's just a bit of the numbers. You have 144 Jewish forms of settlement, but 18 Arab forms of settlement in the Naqab, when the Arab community is actually a third of the population. Amir, let's hear about your experience in the committee of Az-Zarnuq.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Amir Abu Ghwaider. I'm one of the founders of the local committee in Az-Zarnuq. Az-Zarnuq is one of the unrecognized communities. It means it has been omitted from any statutory planning by the state. It means it doesn't show up. It doesn't show up on any Israeli maps. All the development plans, be it electricity network, be it military zones, factories being established, they can actually be situated or be located on an Arab Bedouin village, because it doesn't really show up on the maps. So Az-Zarnuq is one of those villages you mentioned before. The people before me mentioned before, like figures of like 45 unrecognized communities or even more. In those communities, we have more than 100,000 people living in such communities. What does it mean to be an unrecognized community? I mean, be it you're not connected to the electricity grid. You don't have any infrastructure, be it you don't have paved roads, you don't have any sewage system, you don't have any garbage disposal, run by the state or by the municipality. So people have to rely on themselves in order to manage their daily life. So the Bedouin community in general, and it's very important to understand, or to remind ourselves of the fact that we are talking about a community that was actually depleted. destroyed totally. I mean, if you're talking about 100,000 people or even more, and out of them, the reminder of them was like 12,000 people. And if you historically analyze such similar events, then the people who couldn't flee, the people who couldn't run away, they are normally the less fortunate people. And so we were talking about devastated or destroyed community that has to collect itself from the very beginning. So we are not the first ones. I mean, we are, me, Rafat, and others, we are like maybe third or fourth generation of activists in our communities. But we have more tools right now. We got more education, and we are like more privileged than the generations before us. The initiative of organizing Bedouin community started way before the RCUV, which is the Regional Council of the Unrecognized Villages, which is civil society initiative, which was established in the mid-90s by activists, by civil society actors who decided to try to fight this injustice inflicted upon our communities. And it is, we have it is bound to more education, people having more means and tools to change their reality. And the RCUV, as I mentioned, was established in the mid-90s. It is an civil society organization which took the mandate and the responsibility of organizing the different communities in order to raise their voice being heard by the officials, by the state. And because nobody is, I mean, we are citizen of the state of Israel, we vote to the general election, okay? But our political representation was, I mean, back then was not really significant in the Israeli politics, and this takes us to the current situation. We will get back later. So the RCUV, the Regional Council of the Unrecognized Villages, had the mandate of bringing the interests of these communities to the policymakers and to different international forums, and to the wider Israeli public. So local committees like ours were established in different villages. We're talking about 35 villages, and being those local committees are actually represented in the so-called, in the RCUV, Regional Council of Unrecognized Villages. And this is how this community organized itself at the very beginning. Me personally, I got involved in the community, in the local community in Israel like 8 years ago, which was relatively inactive. And I mean, it's a very painful experience working. I mean, you don't have any political, backing. You don't have the Israeli judicial system is relatively blocked to you. So not a lot of people are like willing to, deal with this painful issue. So the idea was actually to establish a local committee in order to provide some solutions. And Zarnouk, it has like 5,000 people who are living in it. Okay, you have so as a community, we needed to work, be it the establishment of a primary school, which is a very essential and very basic right, postulated by the rules, by the laws of the Israeli state, that every single human has the right of education. So in the early I think in the early 2000, the primary school was established after petitioning to the Israeli courts. Um, um, so the first primary school was established by the like my predecessors of the local committee, who managed to mobilize our community in order to with the help of the judicial system, with this petitioning, we managed to establish the very first primary school in our community. Later on, we went in like bringing more healthcare services into our community, which was also a struggle. I mean, it's always important for me to like rehearse the fact that every single service that people are getting is related to struggle, be it legal struggle or a demonstration people have to go. It's never being like given to you like any other equal citizen of the state of Israel. So later on, I mean, we managed also. By like fascinating work of civil society actors, the community, and also some political backup that we got to to um, establish the second high school in our community. I mean, the first high school, the first second school, first high school in our community. Um, and also in one of the recent developments was bringing public transportation into our community, and it's a game changer in a lot of cases because public transportations provide people with means. I mean, be it, for example, women employment sometimes is being like undermined by the fact that people don't have the means to travel from place to place, and providing public transportation. And it's also important to understand that the services we're giving, they're not just uh, having the impact on like the materialistic features. When women, for example, being employed and having bringing some income, it also brings more balance into the relationship. It also impacts our the social relation, and it has also for us some good consequences and ramifications of empowerment of women, for example. So be it bringing public transportation or high school being established in our community, or having, I mean, we work very hard to host a lot of groups visiting us, be it with the NCF and other organizations, and we took it as our mandate to explain to our fellow citizens situation, because in a lot of cases, and I'm not being naive, but in a lot of cases, the depiction and the portrayal of the Arab Bedouins in the Israeli like mainstream media is more like, is a very negative one. They are always being portrayed, be it as trespassers or as thugs, or so the Israeli public opinion about the Bedouin community is totally misled and biased, and we in our local committee try to bring more balance into this situation. So the local committees are essential and crucial because we don't have any municipalities, we don't have any governmental body that provides us with minor services that people are actually supposed to have as Israeli citizens. I would like just maybe if I have enough time and how I'm doing with time.
You're good. You have time.
Yeah, okay. So maybe having some complementary comments on what Huda said about the Bedouin community and the history. It's not, sometimes this struggle of the Bedouin community or is being perceived as a struggle between the past and modernization, or this tendency to cling to the tradition and past, and sometimes being brought up as a cultural issue. But historically seen, it's not just about culture, it's about policies. I mean, it's not just that the state of Israel would like to regulate these communities, and the word of regulation already implies, I think, colonial motivation, because I mean, we are the natives who need regulation by the white man who would like to bring everything in order, because our communities, they are just fine. I mean, they don't have to be regulated, because the pretext the Israeli state normally uses is we would like to concentrate the different Bedouin communities into one place in order to provide them with the needed with the services they claim they are obliged to have. Okay, but on the other hand, and we see that this is actually politically motivated, and this is tied to the different policies, and the policy is actually to concentrate Arabs and disperse Jews within this space in order to, this is old Zionism, be it here in the Naqab, in the Galilee, or actually nowadays in the West Bank. So just to emphasize and just to demonstrate that the intentions, the malintentions of the state are clearly seen in, for example, in Avitar. Avitar is a Jewish settlement, was established 1 month ago, and nowadays we have a lot of clashes in the West Bank from the citizens of Beta with newcomers. It's a even according to Israeli officials, it's an illegal outpost. But this outpost, in less than 1 month, it was connected to the electricity grid. Paved roads were established. Running water is there. So the state, when it really wants, and just remember, this is an illegal outpost. It's not a settlement or with like few, less than 100 people living. So we are talking a lack of political willingness and motivated by the paradigm of dispersing Jewish communities and concentrated Arab communities. And we, and I always try to I wouldn't say alleviate, but I would say Bedouins are stubborn. Okay, I mean, people who decide to go and live in this very arid and very hot climate, they have something in their minds. So despite the fact, I mean, just remember the facts: 10,000 people. Nowadays, we are talking about 250,000 of Bedouins are living in the Naqab. If we were talking about 80 communities that were wiped out in the Nakba, more than 80 communities nowadays we are talking about 10 different or 13 different state recognized communities and tens of other communities. So if the current I think the motivation, I mean, for us, I'm pretty much sure that our community will have recognition. Okay, so just a matter of time and a matter of how many students will have ability to go to the higher education, and I mean it's just a matter of time, and the relationship between the state and its citizen. I mean, and it has I don't think people seeing their communities, their houses being evicted and their houses being demolished on a regular basis, they have like a good sentiment for this. So if you have any questions, I would like to respond. There are a lot of things to say, but very important for us, for my community in Zarnoug. I welcome you, everybody whoever would like to come and visit us in Zarnoug. Our doors are open, and we need help. I mean, we need help. We need your support. And thank you for this opportunity to speak to you.
Amir, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your actions and your input to the current situation and also historical situation that has not changed very much, I think, in many decades. And I think being invited to Zarnoug is a really great honor that people should take advantage of because you won't regret visiting Amir and his lovely family. And I'll just say that Amir and his family have been volunteering for years now, hosting people in their village, in their homes, walking people around free of charge, just to share the story with others, because it is so devoid in media and communications, in Israeli policy and the parliament. And only now we're starting to see this reality showing in the hallways of the parliament and speaking about unrecognized villages as a condition to continue functioning as a government that takes Arab citizens seriously and their access to human rights seriously. So this is my opportunity to introduce Rafat, who will speak about recent events and his experience in recent events, perhaps how you see the current government and this condition of recognizing 3 out of 35 unrecognized villages as a positive or a negative thing, or I don't know, I guess maybe an unclear opportunity, and a bit about yourself. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So at first, I'm very happy to see Amir and Huda, because we're considered to be friends and we haven't been seeing each other for years. We need Zoom meetings by NCF to see each other. And that counts for you too, Odelia. Anyway, so yeah, I'll be going there, but I'll start by maybe going into some of the points my colleagues mentioned before. When it comes, Huda mentioned a very important point before that talks about the whole trip of Bedouins, the calling of Bedouins for being nomads and no relationship to the land, and the idea of Bedouin traveling. So Huda mentioned the point of Bedouins traveling in the winter and summer, and I would add more to that, it's known that Bedouins travel inside their own land. So the summer trip is a trip that you go down the mountain in order to be in the shade of the mountain. And the winter trip is a trip that you go up the mountain in order to not go by the floods and not have the floods on you when it's raining. So that's in your own land. So the connection between Bedouins and land is a very important connection, and we have been hearing the stories and talked to by our parents and grandparents about it our whole lives. And lots of people have suffered so much and paid prices because the Israeli government wanted to take their land and or did take their land. My family is one of them too. So to go into the previous events, like the past few weeks have been crazy. But why did that happen is because Amir talked about the Zionist mentality and the settler colonial methods and government and the whole Zionist project that we have here. The problem is not discrimination. It's much more. It's occupation that we live on a daily basis. People have been followed and put in jail, persecuted and beaten in police cars for no reasons. We're talking about thousands of youth and minors of Palestinians in the 48 who have Israeli citizenships, who only participated in protests or maybe activities saying no to the war in Gaza, or saying no to the taking of the houses of people in Sheikh Jarrah, or maybe not doing nothing. They were just caught on the street because they were Arabs, or maybe they were assaulted by Jewish settlers and Jewish right wings, and they defended themselves or didn't. And that's what happened with the students of Beersheba, for example, who the idea was a bunch of students who participated in a protest, a small protest that was legal by the Israeli police. And at the time, because they refused the war in Gaza, and at the time, hundreds of right-wing Israelis tried to assault them and attack them. And when these students called the police came and beated all the Arab students in the campus and arrested 8 of them, and they didn't take any other Israelis. So I was taking me and my little brother, I was taken to the Shabak for 3 days. When I came back, I found my brother is inside, and he was taking also. He took 15 days, and he still has he has a file with the Israeli police, and he's going to courts yet. So the idea is that being an activist is a great charge these days in Israel, and you can be persecuted just for saying Palestinian. All the democratic coverage that was always put on us wasn't real when the Israelis felt that they might be in a real threat because Palestinians are speaking out. In the Israeli courts, we saw that also the policeman and the judge and the Knesset member are against Arabs, and there's no real authorities that can judge each other or can make different decisions. At some point, one of the judges said to one of the great lawyers who volunteered to help the young Bedouins who were arrested, he said, sorry, Nasser, but this is not in my hand, this is from above. So I don't think the democratic country of Israel is any different from any dictator that we have around. So, and for me, myself, my opinion is that this is the real occupation without no makeups. This is how it goes. There's no need for makeups anymore. This should have happened way before, because the only problem is that Israel might fear is just to be called undemocratic when it's not in reality. It's just a majority ruled country that's really into it, and they love the occupation part in dealing with people. When it comes to, I'll be short because I'm sorry also, Delia, I'll have to leave, and I'll leave the questions part to my colleagues. When it comes to the new government, I don't believe in any difference between Bennett or Netanyahu or anything. I think it's going to be much worse the coming, because we finally have a real settler ruler of Israel. Well, it's all settlements, but this guy is like hardcore settler. And I think the recognition of 3 towns that were already in the process of recognizing, and even if they got recognized, we have seen how the newly recognized towns since the year 2000 have done. The problem is not fixing, or is not how much are we loyal to Israel as Palestinians of the Naqab. It's settler colonialism that doesn't believe in our right to own our lands. And they're trying to kick us out as they kick the people. They feel the mistake that they didn't kick all the Palestinians out of Palestine for the year 48. So, and this is what we live on a daily basis. And this is the racism we see. And I don't believe that going away from the Palestinian patriotic part and our main identity values anywhere is gonna help the Palestinian minority inside. And this is what the years proved, and this is what the events proved. The only way to fight occupation is just to be who you are and to be Palestinian, to have one decision in all of our main and original cases and with our values. And thank you all.
Rafat, thank you. Very much appreciate you coming. It's also Rafat's birthday, so he made a big effort today to come, especially on this day. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'll just add to what Rafat said, that I came to this protest only an hour after I think Rafat, you were arrested. And it was a very peaceful, non-violent protest on the Palestinian students' side, where across from these students were around 100 extreme right-wing protesters with Israeli flags yelling out calls for genocide of the Arab people. Nothing, no less than that. May your villages burn and death to Arabs. It was extremely painful situation to see. And I imagine that this isn't a rare occurrence. But in my experience, working at some point as well, these extreme right protesters started throwing stones at Arab students who had to be forced by the police into their dormitories in order to stay safe from the extreme right protesters who were threatening to physically hurt them. And they stayed in their dormitories until the morning. In my work doing media coverage for this protest and trying to communicate this event to Israeli media, most of them covered this as if it was an equal parts situation, as if Arab students incited violence, as if these arrests of nonviolent Arab students was a threat to the Jewish protesters. And I think hearing Rafat, for example, share his personal story and experience and amplify this voice of reason and shedding light on and day-to-day discrimination, as well as discrimination in media and authority to protesters who were nonviolent and Palestinian versus protesters who were violent and Jewish. Some of the students arrested will have criminal charges against them, although there's no evidence that they were violent. So I think that's a very important point, Rafat, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to say goodbye, Delia. So bye to everyone. Thank you a lot for hosting me.
Bye, Rafat. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So now we will open the floor for questions.
Right. If anyone watching on Facebook also has questions, feel free to write us there. And every question is probably a good question. I can see.
Hi, Odelia, and this is Josh. You hear me okay?
It's also Josh's birthday. Happy birthday, Josh.
Thank you. Thank you, Huda and Amir, for your presentations. So it sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, which is always never pleasant to hear. But what do you think are the top 3 small baby steps that can happen, like in the next 6 to 12 months, that haven't happened yet? Obviously, we don't change the world overnight, even if it's deserved to be changed. That's not the way the world works. But so what kind of baby step improvements, that are realistic? And we have a new government. We just heard from Amir. Maybe he's not so optimistic about the new government being helpful, but there is a new government and it is new people, including new parties on the left and on the Arab side and also on the right, as Amir pointed out. But so I'd be interested in hearing kind of some nice baby step improvements that you would like to see, or that you think can be winnable, over the next 6 to 12 months to make the situation better tomorrow than it is today, even if it's a little bit, and every day can be a little bit better, and eventually it gets a lot better. But what kind of ideas are you guys thinking of in your groups about those baby steps that can be taken?
Okay, I will take it from here. I think the sorrows and the pains of the Arab community, in the southern region. For example, the biggest worry of people in my community, people who are like meeting me, is house demolition. And if the government will decide to create framework for freezing house demolitions, I mean, you have to create a legal framework, as you know, those houses are considered, according to Israeli law, illegal, and you can't just make them legal for like. But you can show political willingness, which to some extent we have witnessed in the last negotiations between the Ram party and Lapid, or coalition members. But still, they are very hesitant. Still, they are very anxious from the response of the deep, so-called deep right. But to freeze house demolition, create a legal framework that will alleviate the pains of. I mean, I can count more than 10 to 20 individuals from my community who are not being able to marry. I mean, somebody his wedding is next week and he doesn't have a place to live. And this is very painful for people, and I think this is the very first thing that should be done something about it. So house demolitions, to create a legal framework that would not embarrass the government too much of giving the Arabs, making everything legal. Okay, legalizing everything is something that, I mean, being politically realistic, it's not going to happen. But I think this is a first step. And you mentioned baby steps, Josh. Huda mentioned also the fact that there are three communities that are supposed to have the recognition. And to be honest, Josh, Abda, for example, I think Abda, Hashim Zanne, and Rakham. Abda was actually recognized or granted recognition like 15 years ago, and nothing really happened. Hashim Zanne, and we have a lot of stallments in the process of recognition, because even communities which were recognized like 15 years ago, they still lack statutory master plans, for example. So to speed up this process might give people also more confidence, more trust in the government. Because if the state is actually proclaiming that you have to move to the township, but the township doesn't have any infrastructure, people don't have any motivation. I mean, to move to different communities, putting aside all the issue of land ownership, everything else. Okay, so freezing house demolitions, the recognition of the three communities, which were actually the recognition of those communities were actually proclaimed by Netanyahu. I mean, not Bennett, but Bennett is prone to pressure from the right wing because his political basis is there, and he is very hesitant, and this government is very volatile, and everything is very fragile right now. And talking about the political impact of the Arab, look, we are living in a crazy world. I mean, really, I can't believe it. State of Israel is, the practices being used, the policies being maintained are ultra right wing. Okay, but on the other hand, in order to move Netanyahu, and be clear, it wasn't about moving Netanyahu away. There is some opportunity, but there is some opportunity for different policy, for different politics. Okay, and I think, a lot of people in the Arab community are like wielding a lot of pressure on Abbas, and he's betraying his community. He's betraying the Palestinian Arab or the Arab, but I think he's showing a lot of courage, and we will wait and see how things will evolve.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Amir. It's an interesting response. Thank you.
I would also like to add on to Amir's point that recognition of villages, like we mentioned earlier, also Huda mentioned this about the townships. When they are recognized, the plans that are applied onto these villages are provided by a kind of Jewish and westernized version of how a village should look. So you have entire agricultural settlements in the Naqab that are Jewish, but the Arab ones aren't permitted agricultural land to live on. And so for these three villages that will be recognized now to actually be success stories and not just another village where the only difference between Az-Zarnoug, for example, an unrecognized village, and Abu Tlul is that in Az-Zarnoug, they have a school that is built in a caravan because it has to be a temporary building. And in Abu Tlul, it's in a concrete building. There is a road and a sign. That is not recognizing a village and applying a plan that allows people access to basic human rights. So Abde, Khasham Zanna, and Rahme, they have master plans that they created with an organization, for example, called BIMCOM, which is Architects for Human Rights. There are master plans for almost every unrecognized village that they have decided that they will agree to. All of these plans, they are based off of Israeli law, planning law. So they're legal plans, they're applicable plans. But the plans that are always applied on these villages are ones that westernized and kind of Jewish version with an ideology and agenda to concentrate Bedouins into smaller pieces of land. Those are the ones that are actually applied. So you can go to recognized villages and meet people who are just as unhappy with their situation as those in unrecognized villages. And I think this is it's not a very difficult step to make. And we're hoping that this step is taken.
Well, I want to also add some points to your to the answers. I think like few days ago, Bennett said in 2 sentences that they will solve or concentrate the Bedouin to some solution. And in my feelings, it's gonna be like kind of destroy most of the villages and bring, well, because of Ram inside the coalition, it's maybe gonna be a little bit soft, but the idea is, again, the idea of the state, no matter who is in the government, it's the same, to concentrate most of the Bedouin in a very small area, put them all together, and then like kind of clean the land from the Bedouin communities. They want to just bring us all together to small villages, small areas, concentrate us in very small pieces of land, and then use the land for other projects for the state. And then when you go to the court, I learned law, so all of my education is how we use the law to our interests. And so how the state is using the law, they said to the court that it is for the public, it's for public using, or we need to move these people because we have bigger projects for the state or for the army or for so other big plans that we are not part of. The Bedouin community is not part of. So even if you go to the court, you will lose the case because of this idea, because the judges will say, okay, the other projects is more useful, is for helping other communities, not only the Bedouin community. So it's okay to move people from place to place, or to build this projects as Road 6, for example, or as Kiryat Mudin, which is army camp for the army camp is that the army is building very close to Lakia, my village. So now we cannot use the lands. We cannot grow up. We will stay in a very small piece, and after 20 years we will not have any place to grow. So this is the policy, and this is the state, and no matter which government is there, the policy is the same.
Hi, Tamar.
Hi, Odelia.
You have a question?
Yeah, sort of a question and a comment. I want to thank you, Odelia and Devin and Huda and Amir and your other friend. I think it took and it takes a tremendous amount of courage to present yourselves, to reach the public, to build awareness. And I'd like to comment on strategy. There's a couple things that I'm thinking about. I've lived in this country for over 30 years. I felt devoted to I've been devoted to the Jewish nation for all my life, and devoted to Israel as a country from the time I was a young person. And one might think that I had, white privilege to come and establish myself here, unless a person takes time to get to know from where are my roots, of course. My parents on one side did not have such a privilege.